Hey, welcome everyone to One Exponential. Super excited to be here with you today. Today we're going to be learning about how to become EXO awake and leveraging the exponential markets out there. The landscape is changing for sure. My name is Steven Rodríguez. I'll be here as an EXO ambassador to help guide you through this journey. But first, let's kind of learn a little bit more about what is exponential technology, more or less, to get a better sense of it all.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
And so that's a video from the World Economic Forum describing what they call the fourth industrial revolution. But there are many other names that you might have read so far, books on things such as the second machine age, Industry 4.0, the age of disruption, and many others. Some people are even saying that what is happening is actually beyond an industry. It's actually affecting the whole society and not just limited to these industries. During the last 300 years, we've been kind of going through subsequent iterations of industrial revolutions, fundamental changes in how the world looks like, for example, for good or bad. Undeniable massive impact on humanity, 1 billion to 8 billion humanity affected by these subsequent revolutions. And of course, it's not all equitable distribution. Still a portion of the population that don't have access to third industrial revolution technologies. For example, 40% are not connected online. 900 million people don't have access to electricity. So there's still things we need to do. And to take this a step further, the fourth industrial revolution may not necessarily be this right now. We are still in the transition and learning, like going from scarcity-based business models to something we call abundance. We'll see if this was a fourth industrial revolution or just phase one of a cycle with many more to come. But let's say we take the fourth industrial revolution. First industrial revolution started really in the UK, which was the pioneer of the first industrial revolution in the 17th and 18th century. Most of it was built on steam, but there were other machines also. We have industrialized a lot of our production, which eventually led into the second industrial revolution. And at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, electricity became a big deal. And we have also designed new ways to produce things, which we scale, such as assembly lines. Finally, we had a revolution around information technologies and computing, which we are at the end of, starting in the 50s and 60s and full coming to fruition at the beginning of the 21st century. I think it's fair to say that even today, we are still feeling the impact of the last one and how much it has changed our world. And so we're now at the beginning stages of the fourth industrial revolution. It might seem that we are quite far into it, but actually we are still at the beginning. And I'll explain in a second why. So if you consider how much the world has changed in the previous industrial revolutions, it's by no means an understatement to assume that there are big changes ahead of us. And so 30 years in the making, the speed of development is not linear, but actually exponential. These are some technologies that are making up the fourth industrial revolution today, although there are more of them that you can see here than what you're seeing here. We can start on the top. We have artificial intelligence, which is both a narrow and artificial, which means specific applications of artificial intelligence. There are also advancements being done in artificial general intelligence, although comparatively, it is much less advanced still. And then we have blockchain and cryptocurrencies. That's another one. I assume most of you are familiar with these. It's been on the news, but I still think that the potential of what these mean for the global economic and financial system has not yet been explored at all to its full extent. Another is biotechnology, then augmented and virtual reality and drones. Actually, this is a small drone, but a big drone can also be called the flying car, which are advancing forward as well. Next is solar energy and energy in general, especially renewable energies, quantum computing. The one on the picture is actually a quantum computer that is already built. It's from a company called Rigetti, and you can actually go online and rent the space on this quantum computer for your quantum algorithms and applications. You can actually program it. It's now in the cloud, and you can run quantum computing applications. Finally, there are digital manufacturing, self-driving cars, and robotics. So these are just some of the technologies that are happening all at once. In reality, it's more like 20 within a matter of moments, which are all happening at the same time. You remember, for example, Gutenberg, when he came with a printing press, it completely changed how we as society and humanity disseminate knowledge, how we absorb it. And we now have the equivalent of 20 Gutenberg moments happening all at once. For all these reasons, I think it's fair to say that the world is changing faster than anyone has predicted. And why is that? So one of the key reasons for this is actually the underlying dynamic behind those technologies and why they are growing so fast. These technologies, we call them exponential technologies because they are all powered by information tech or information science. This means Moore's law applies. And what does that mean? So for more than 50 years, the price of performance of microchips doubles roughly every 18 months. Exponential progression and doubling pattern is very deceptive as it grows very slow from a very long time and then suddenly it explodes. It seems that nothing is happening, but then suddenly everything is different. All the technologies that we mentioned are powered by information and microchips, which also means they are subject to Moore's law. And that means they are indeed very deceptive. So let me show you what I mean. If I ask you now to stand up and go 30 steps, you know pretty much where you're going to be at the end of that journey. At the end of 30 meters in the direction that you choose, and you can estimate very well where you will be at any given point of the journey, most likely. You can estimate where halfway will be, where 2/3 is. Linear progression is quite easy to understand and it's predictable. However, what if I asked you how to take 30 exponential steps, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16? This is just one kind of exponential progression, doubling at every step. And this is what happens. So you will reach likely billion meters, which is roughly an equivalent of being 27 times around the Earth. This is quite different to linear progression, but what is most shocking around this is that it is impossible to predict where you are going to be halfway through or elsewhere because our minds are just not used to thinking that way. So let's have a look at this. If you take 15 steps, which is normally halfway to the final destination, you won't even reach 0.01% of your total distance. You can see the rest of the numbers on the slide, 20 steps, 25 steps. Actually, the last 5 steps account for 97%, most of all of the final results. And again, this only happens in the last 5 steps. This is something that is pretty hard for us to understand. All the technologies we're speaking about, they have been developing for many years, sometimes even for decades, but they are now entering into a phase where they're moving to the steeper part of the curve, which is what makes things quite unpredictable. And this one picture, I feel, says it all. It's a prediction of the world's experts about the rate of growth of photovoltaic panels, essentially growth in adoption of solar energy. There are yearly predictions of top experts predicting how much the market will grow each year. And you can see that each year experts predicted an incremental growth or even decline in the market. But the black line is actually what happened. It is growing exponentially and fast. Even as the experts forecasted small growth or even decline, it's staggering to me how that for so many years, the expert predictions were completely wrong. The reality went on exponential curve and nobody kind of noticed it. They're all super smart people. They're educated in everything and experts in their industries. It just shows how difficult it is for us humans being to kind of get this exponential mindset. Salim Ismail, who wrote the book Exponential Organizations and kind of shed light on this in his chapter, He calls it beware of the expert, because actually it turns out that experts are not very good at predicting the future just because they are usually predicting in a linear way, not exponentially. And this is why people like Elon Musk can appear very, very crazy at the beginning, but then can produce some amazing outcomes further down the line. So this is our estimate. We are right at the knee of the curve. This is why we believe our future is being defined as we speak, and there are incredible business opportunities ahead. Any technology on this slide has been developing quietly for years, sometimes decades, but all of them are hitting the knee of the curve now or in the next few years, and that will change our world in fundamental ways and shape our future. However, there is one more thing happening. While each of these technologies is disruptive in its own, because many of them are hitting the knee of the curve just about now, their convergence is what creates an unprecedented and previously unseen pace of change. And let me give you an example. So let's speak about flying cars. Flying cars have been appearing in science fiction literature for around 100 years. In fact, many people were sure that in the year 2000, or for sure the year 2020, we would be zipping around in flying cars at our leisure. However, this isn't happening quite just yet. In fact, Peter Thiel, a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, said as a critique of the tech industry, we wanted flying cars, and what we got was 140 characters, or now 280. From Twitter. He was making fun in part because, but also asking a serious question. Why are we not building flying cars? And one of the reasons was that until now, the technology to make it just didn't exist. And what is happening now is thanks to the convergence of multiple exponential technologies, it is becoming finally possible. As we mentioned, each one of these technologies is by themselves disruptive, but when they start to converge together, amazing things become possible. It is now predicted that we will see fully operational available flying cars within this decade. C1, so in 2019 alone, there have been $1 billion invested in at least 25 flying car companies. And here you can see few technologies that were developed for a diverse set of applications, but when they are brought together, they can make the flying car a reality. So distributed electronic compulsion means you can have multiple engines that coordinate and operate quietly, which is kind of very different than a helicopter with one loud, large, noisy engine, which also happens to be very dangerous. When distributed electric propulsion, you have multiple engines that are quiet and all coordinated via AI algorithms that can synchronize the small engines. This is because it's impossible for a pilot to do it manually. So this development needed to happen to make this system possible. Then you have things like LiDAR, accelerometers, GPS, and other tracking devices which were developed in other places like self-driving cars and mobile phones, but they happen to be very useful for a flying car as well. Thanks to developments and research in solar energy, we now also have batteries that are capable to store enough power to fuel a flying car for as long as it needs. Also, we have advanced computer simulations that can design better shapes and aerodynamic materials. New materials have appeared in material science, and also 3D printers are now actually able to print whole parts and sections which weren't possible before. Today, we can actually print a large percentage of an aircraft engine, which is incredible when you think of it as the sophistication and safety requirements that's involved in these, and so that's huge. Because all of these technologies, the flying car is finally possible, but not only as a flying car, as you saw in the previous slide. The future is faster than you think. The convergence of this technology is speeding things up. As such, it is important for us to keep asking about the future and study just resources that can help us better peek into and understand the future. It's nothing to be scared of. It's happening, and we just have to kind of, see things. Ray Kurzweil famously said that we are about to experience 20,000 years of technological progress in just 100 years. That's basically from the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago to the present moment twice within the next century. So it's very, very fast. But let's have a look at what this actually means for businesses. So how do these technologies actually impact society? How do they impact the world? And how do they impact industries and businesses? Peter Diamandis is one of the co-founders of Singularity University. He is also founder of the X Foundation and the Abundance 360 and abundance digital communities. Now, Peter defines something called the 6 Ds. Basically, he says that once a domain becomes information enabled, it goes on a predictable trajectory characterized by the 6 Ds: digitize, deceptive, disruptive, demonetize, dematerialize, and democratize. So think about all the money invested today into the digital transformation. Well, that's just a step number 1 out of the 6. There are also 5 more that organizations have to deal with and can tap into. I sometimes say that becoming digital is like you're buying yourself a ticket for the fourth industrial revolution, but it's not the endpoint. It's actually just the beginning. So I'm going to cover each one of them in sequence to kind of give you a better sense of things. So digitization is really about taking things that were previously analog and turning them into data, into digital information. There's about 1 trillion sensors predicted to be all around the world soon, and each one of these gathers digital data. Many things that were previously invisible to computers will suddenly be visible. They can be analyzed and worked with. Nearly every domain of our society, nearly every organization is becoming digital today and age. When that happens, the domain then enters into a deceptive phase. An interesting metaphor for this is from nature. Let's say the Chinese bamboo. When you plant it for 5 years, nothing happens. You don't see anything, but something is happening underground. It's just that you can't see it. After 5 years in the ground, it then starts growing, and in 5 weeks, it actually grows to be 25 meters. For 5 years, nothing. And then in 5 weeks, it is the fastest growing plant on the planet. This is what we call the deceptive period. A similar pattern exists with every exponential technology. You can see on the graph that initially, until you hit the knee of the curve, the exponential curve is actually slower than linear. People actually tend to underestimate what is possible. It seems nothing is happening. And let me give you a different example to kind of drive this point home. You know, when Craig Venter was sequencing the human genome for the first time, there was a set large budget and a timeline, and it was going very slow. When they were about 1% of the final outcome, it seemed they will need another 70 years to finish it at this pace. Most people were telling Craig to stop and save himself the embarrassment, as they didn't see any way the project could be done on time and on budget. But Ray Kurzweil noticed that the progression was exponential, not linear. When people were losing faith in the project, he said they are halfway done. And surely enough, the project was finished under budget and before the deadline. So this is just an example of the power of exponentials. And genome sequencing is even going faster than doubling, faster than Moore's law. So exponential progression is deceptive for a very long time. And then suddenly we have a black swan and things become disruptive. So you do have some industries, books, newspapers, music, and movies that got disrupted, and you have the corresponding disruptors. The apps are all around on the slide. So first 3 Ds, digitized, deceptive, and disruptive. And then it gets very interesting. The second set of 3 Ds. First is demonetize. Essentially, the money disappears from the old business model. So the old way of making money, which is built on scarcity, just old technology, an old business model, they start to disappear and vanish. It's already happened in several industries and many more to come. For example, what happens when telecommunications companies, once the internet connection is more ubiquitous? What happens with electricity companies once we figure out free or at least very cheap energy? Let's say the sun in combination with exponentially improving batteries and peer-to-peer energy networks. It's likely going to happen in every, or at least in most industries, this convergence. So we often ask companies, what would you do if your core product of today is available for free tomorrow? And how will you make money? I think it's a very important question, and companies should be asking that today. Next is dematerialized. You can see on the video over how so everything we used for our work office, we moved away from being analog to being more digital. Software is eating the world, which was said by Mark Andreessen. And I think this will keep happening. I think we should not forget that the physical world, because it is very important, but it is quite likely that more and more of our daily, professional, and maybe even our personal lives will be moving to digital space. So the final outcome of that is that a lot of things are becoming democratized. While there is still a lot of inequality in the world, there is also at the same time more quality in certain domains than we have ever had. People have access to things that they have never had access to before. If you have a mobile phone connected to the internet, you have access to more information than presidents and heads of state had just a few decades ago. At the same time, with all this informational abundance, it has become kind of crucially important to be intentional and selective about what information you actually pay attention to. These trends are already impacting businesses everywhere. The IE Business School did a research in 2019 and found that 40% of European company employees are saying their companies will disappear in the next 10 years if they don't radically change themselves. So the survey on the right was made around asking 700 CEOs, asking them what keeps them up at night. And while first thing on the list, talent is no surprise, the second, third, and fourth are new. These would normally not appear in surveys like this. The necessity to be aware of exponential technologies, the need to capitalize on them and invent new business models and innovation and investing into next generation leaders. All of these are now becoming major concerns and sources of competitive advantage. And note that cost reduction is only number 5. So this is a brief introduction into the context of technological progress in the world today and how this affects society and organizations today. But for society to be fully changed by a new technology, something else is needed. So to kind of give you some context here, on the photos on the slide, you can see Fifth Avenue, New York, on the New York City on the same day, 13 years apart. On the left, all the horses, carriages, and one car. On the right, all cars and no horses. Actually, someone mentioned there is a horse carriage on there somewhere, but they just can't find it. Most of these cars are Model Ts that Henry Ford produced, but it wasn't only the cars that made this possible. The cars were actually existing long before Henry Ford started to make them. It was the business innovation that he brought, actually. Instead of pricing the cars by taking production costs, adding a margin on top, and arriving to a market price, he went the other way around. He set the price first in a way that it would directly compete with the horse carriages, a dominant mode of transport in large American cities at the beginning of the 20th century. The price he chose made it uneconomical to keep buying horse carriages over cars. Then he deducted the desired margin and arrived at the needed production costs, which were way lower than the cost to produce cars at the time. As such, he needed to reinvent how cars were made and came up with one of the major innovations of the second industrial revolution, the assembly line. Like this, he succeeded to completely disrupt the horse carriage market in just 13 years and displaced the dominant mode of transport at that time in just over a decade. So technology is only one part, but innovative and smart business model is of also crucial importance. As such, as technologies around us are progressing at exponential pace, we need to also look at whether our organizations are structured well to capitalize on them. Salim Ismail from Exponential Organizations book and the author team of that book have done a thorough research into around, let's say, 200 of the most iconic, innovative, and original companies in the 2020s. Their central question was, can our organizations scale as fast as our technologies can? And if so, how are they doing it? And they found out that there are about 11 secret ingredients that these companies are tapping into. These ingredients are like a blueprint of scalable, innovative, fast-growing, and very successful organizations. And we call these exponential organizations. So essentially, I know just to kind of high level go into this, there's something called the ExO formula. First, there's something called the massive transformative purpose, or MTP for short. Then there are 5 attributes that are externally focused and help to access the abundance that exists in the actual market. Like Airbnb is tapping into the abundance of spare bedrooms that already existed even before it was founded. Uber or Lyft are tapping into the abundance of the available cars and drivers, and so on. These 5 attributes can be remembered under the acronym of SCALE: staff on demand, community and crowd, algorithms, leveraged assets, and engagement. And then there are 5 internally focused attributes that helped to manage this market of abundance internally. These are under the acronym of IDEAS: interfaces, dashboards, experimentation, autonomy, and social technologies. So all of the 11 attributes are important. MTP gives direction to the organization. Scale attributes help to discover and benefit from sources of abundance in the market, and idea attributes ensure this abundance and the growth it produces can be effectively managed internally. You can also notice there's the information box on the left here. You can summarize all the digital sources of information an organization can tap into and leverage. And on the right, you have the implementation box, which summarizes the next steps. And this is usually the final step of working with an ExO canvas. So let's listen to Salim describing each of these attributes.
Here's a Silicon Valley secret you need to know. It might seem as though unicorns like Uber or Airbnb have just been in the right place at the right time. Or maybe it's just luck. But as I've shown with many companies, exponential results can be deliberately engineered. And I'm going to show you how. Take YouTube. They went from being funded by the credit cards of the founder to being acquired by Google for $1.4 billion in less than 18 months. And then there's Instagram. At the same time as Kodak was shutting down, Instagram gets acquired by Facebook for $1 billion after just 3 years and with 13 employees. These companies are what we call exponential organizations, or EXOs. They have 10 times the impact of their competition. If you're a leader in an organization and you're passionate about building an amazing company, you have an ambition to make this company more than just a way to get by, you should be working on becoming an EXO like YouTube or Instagram. Because if you're not, other people aren't. There are 11 attributes of EXO that I want to share with you. The first and most important is what we call a massive transformative purpose, or your MTP. This is your why, what gets you up at 6 a.m. It's what inspires you, what gels a community around you. Next, we have staff on demand. The industrial age is over. Even big companies like AMP are now outsourcing what they can. This makes your company agile, flexible, fast-moving, and super cost-effective. Then you have community and crowd. An EXO builds systems to get the best people to come to you. They learn how to leverage growing communities to scale faster and bigger than at any time in the history of business. The fourth is algorithms. The best EXOs leverage data and algorithms to scale in ways that weren't possible even 5 or 10 years ago. Google's PageRank algorithm earns more than $1 billion a week. UPS saves $1 billion a year by routing 55,000 trucks efficiently with an algorithm. Number 5 is leveraged assets. Own only what's absolutely critical and outsource everything else. Think Airbnb being the largest hotel chain in the world without owning a single property. Or Uber, a taxi company that owns no taxis. And number 6 is engagement. You can track in real time how users are interacting, what's working in your marketing, and get feedback on how to improve and where. You're engineering the behaviors you want from your community. The 7th one is interfaces. Big data is big, and an EXO chooses its data wisely. Filter the external chaos into usable and actionable information. That's how you stay agile while scaling. Number 8 is dashboards. EXOs are very data-driven. Companies like Walmart, who track all inventory and credit card transactions in real time, they know the instant something happens and they can react very fast. Number 9 is experimentation. An EXO is constantly iterating on everything and takes calculated risk to test the boundaries of what's possible. They think, measure, test, iterate, and they do it very, very fast and in real time. 10th is autonomy. The old industrial business model is completely outdated. Zappos employees do absolutely what it takes to keep the customer happy. Mindvalley is a fun, flexible workplace built on love. These are what make an EXO faster and more accountable with amazing morale. And finally, number 11 is social technologies. Social platforms like Slack, Yammer, Chatter that allow EXOs to make fast decisions, leverage community, and enable peer-to-peer interactions. This is a brief rundown of the 11 attributes that would make up an exponential organization. But to become an EXO, and you're an existing organization, you need to execute on about 4 of them. If you're a startup, you should be going after all 11. That's the secret. When you're ready to learn more, I explain each one in more detail in a blog post I've linked to below. And so to go to that page and get the full story. See you there.
So that was Salim introducing the different attributes. We know that these attributes can also be applied to any organization of any size in any industry. Not always all of them, but some of them nearly every time. Now let me go through them in a bit more detail and give you a few examples in each category. And as I do, you can be wondering, what could this mean for your organization? So the first one is the massive transformative purpose, or MTP. The MTP is meant to be a statement that describes the essence of an organization. It captures the impact and the organization is creating. In our definition, the massive transformative purpose is not about the company. It's not about being the best and the biggest. Instead, it's about how the world will be different when you succeed as a company, as an organization. It essentially answers the question, why does your organization exist? What is your reason to be? There are some examples here, like the Virgin Group, changing business for good. This is not looking at Virgin as a company. It looks at how Virgin can impact the world by working to turn business into a force for good in the world. All right, so we kind of went through a bit of that for today. I know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Any questions? And here, a very just prominent quote: any company designed for success in the 20th century is doomed to failure in the 21st. So, think about how your organization is running, and is it tapping into any of these attributes, this exponential mindset? And if not, what can you be doing? If you are, that's great. Are there other attributes that you're not touching right now that you could be touching on to become more exponential and have that competitive advantage as the world is changing and all this abundance of new technological advancement is happening all around us? So there's just something to keep in mind. Thank you again. My name is Steven. I was here to kind of share a little bit more, introduce you to this journey, but as with anything, this is just the first step, and hopefully you get to tap into the rest of your journey. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to add in the chat box. We'll be answering them, so let us know. Oh, there's a few different chat channels, Facebook. All right, let me look at also LinkedIn. All right, so a few different questions. As a startup, and let me see if I can jump on the screen very quickly. As a startup, you should essentially be tapping into all of them. Obviously, one at a time if you need to, but you just have the flexibility and the lean agility to kind of tap into all of them at once. Only because you don't have any preset processes or any bureaucracy to kind of slow you down. So you can kind of dive into them at once. So as a startup, you probably should. If you're already an existing organization, then tap into them slowly, one by one, over the quarters or over the years, but at least you're tapping into them, and that's a good start. Just keep in mind. For more information, openexo.com. There's a great community of exponential thinkers and disruptors, as we call ourselves. But really, we all love this concept. We're all trying to tap into the abundance of all these technologies, and it's good just to learn how other people think, or different people are thinking about this, and how they're applying it and use cases for their already existing businesses, or even for some of them startups. And as an exponential as a startup support organization, if you're already working with entrepreneurs, as an example, ExO Builder is just one of the divisions that are already there, helping with this methodology and this mindset that Pedro Lopez kind of leads. There's other organizations, ExO Angels with Nikki, and that's a whole different community that could be of interest there for entrepreneurial support organizations. So there's so many things, and the activity and the community is kind of growing and growing every year. So there's different just mindsets, especially for entrepreneurship related programming. Other questions here. I know there's a book called Exponential Organizations. Yes, there is a book. It was released a few years ago, and now the ExO team is actually working on version 2 of the book. So that should be coming out shortly. Do the lessons apply to startup groups within larger organizations? So I have a question here. If I understand this right, within larger organizations, startup groups meaning innovative departments within an organization that are kind of trying to spin off a new technology or an innovation, or exploring that realm. That's how I'm understanding it. Yes, for bigger organizations, I will say that we do have a special sprint or program called the EXI Sprint, where it kind of helps team members kind of think through the exponential technology and what's happening in the world around us, and then what are some of the product ideas that we can tap into, or explore, and then how to, it's like a process, like a 10-week process, if that's what you mean. And it's called the EXI Sprint. So that is an option for bigger organizations if you want to take certain team members through a curriculum of sorts that helps them then after the 10 weeks, okay, here is the new product innovation that we have based on these exponential technologies that are popping up, and then based on obviously the business model and how it's going to work for the internal company. And then that way it's more like a 10-week R&D sprint to then present to executives and others as to this is the product line that we think because of A, B, and C. And so all of it is research backed based on across those 10 weeks. I know, from a personal point of view, somebody's asking, exponential mindset is a thing, but it's applied to organizations and innovation, but you could also apply to individuals. So Eric Patel from Boston EXO is leading a charge called Exponential Individuals. So how do we kind of become more exponential ourselves? Let's say there's so much information out there because of the abundance there is of people being able to blog and do tweets and all this jazz. So how do we kind of become better individuals in the long term to be able to tap into all this? How do we filter information? How do we be more productive, more effective? How do we do more faster or be the right kind of busy as we're bombarded? And even then, how do we just self-actualize into the person we want to be X year from now? So the charge, if you want to focus more on your individual self to be more exponentially minded, then exponential individuals might be for you in that sense. I think we might be nearing the end of the questions here. I think, this week is One Exponential Summit. We are part of the Global Entrepreneurship Week and super excited to be part of that celebration that happens every year. This year is actually 15 years, and that's pretty awesome. So definitely look at the other programming and events happening for Global Entrepreneurship Week, whether it's One Exponential, but there's 170 countries participating in Global Entrepreneurship Week this year. You're likely to find something of interest or of value in helping you along your journey to grow and scale both yourself, your business, your career, and life. So super excited. Thank you again for this brief time. And if you have any other questions, you can always find me online, and can't wait to see you in EXO communities. Take care, all.